Hi everyone, my name is Stan B and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Stan.
And I'm just going to do this once. I don't usually drink water, but I saw Marie over here this morning. And every time she put that glass in her hand, she really went. Man, she spoke like, there's something about an alcoholic holding a glass in his hand, I guess. So I just want to do it for a little while, and so I can get going here a little bit. And when she put it down, she was kind of quiet, and then she picked that glass up and took a sip, and whoop, she was off and running again. It is indeed a great pleasure and an honor to be asked to come here back to Maryland again. Some of you might not remember, but I was sitting in the front row at the convention in Delmar a few years back, and Sonny, a deceased member of your General Service organization, came to me and said, "How about speaking tonight? The Saturday night speaker didn't show up." And I said, "Fine." I thought I'd discourage her, and I said, "If you want me to speak, let me make out a list of my expenses and pay me, and I'll be glad to." Lo and behold, it didn't happen that way. I was only joking, and I got up to speak. After I got done speaking, the committee came to me and said, "The next time we'll pay you." So here I am. I'm getting paid. Will you imagine? They paid my expenses to bring me out here. It was a great trip. It's a pleasure to see so many of you out here. I remember Maryland when they had 300 at their conventions. I was just talking to a gentleman who remembers 18. For 10 straight years, I came here to Maryland. You were my convention in the summer. I liked the way you did it. I liked the way your speakers talked. And a lot of our other speakers we heard here, we brought back to New Jersey because we enjoyed them. It's a leisurely type of a convention, and this is what I like. I like to take it easy and do what I want and hear good speakers. I hope I can fill the bill for the tradition that you have here in Maryland of having speakers that do deliver a good AA message. I happen to be Polish, and how in God's name you ever got me a Polish leader, I'll never know. But that's probably the first time in the history of Maryland. Maybe in New Jersey, in our neighborhood, it's not so bad. But here, forget it. Anyway, I came into the program a relatively young man. And as a young man, I was faced with a lot of things that the people today aren't faced with. Today, they're 16, they're 17, they're 19, nobody thinks anything of it. At that time, when I was 28, they all looked around and wondered what I was doing there. The young people were started in Newark, New Jersey, and at 40, you're still qualified for this group. So there were no young people. There were a couple, and one was 25 and the other was 27, had 6 more months than I did. And we used to see each other every so often to make sure that there is such a thing. And my sponsor kept saying, "Don't worry, they'll be coming in, they'll be coming in." And I kept waiting and waiting. But I'm glad that I stayed. Because when I came in, I was a young man and they treated me as such. The older men, the old-timers, took me and they treated me like a son. The women who talked to me so nicely, passionately, and not passionate the way you're thinking, I'm the other way, and helped me along in my, whoo, boy, strike that tape, please. I hope my ego is going to run away with me here. You know, I was just talking about ego, and I hope they don't lock me up for this, but there's a little story going around in AA now about the ego. You know, they say that, watch your ego, my sponsor used to tell me. And when I first used to get up here and speak, they used to say, the only thing that's stopping you from delivering a decent talk is your ego. Because you're afraid to make a mistake, you try to impress everybody, put your ego in your pocket and speak. And sure enough, one time a newcomer had about 2 months of sobriety, came to me and knocked the ego right out from under me. And never bothered me since, but there's a little story where this gentleman had a terrific ego. And he got himself a new young secretary. And this young secretary was articulate and nice and everything else, and as proper as can be. So the first time she wanted to give him dictation, take dictation, she noticed that he was sitting there and his fly was open. And being a beautiful secretary, she didn't know what to say. She said, "Sir, when I leave here, please check yourself because your barracks door is open." And he went back, and his ego was starting to grow now. He says, "Who's she thinking?" All that sort of stuff. And he said, "I think I'll have some fun with this young lass." And he called her in. He says, "By the way, young lady, while you were looking at my open barracks door, did you see a young soldier there at attention?" And the secretary said, "No, sir, but I seen an old wounded veteran sitting on 2 duffel bags." Boy, that'll knock the ego from under you, won't it? I started drinking rather early, and I got into trouble rather early. The minute I started to drink, I knew there was something about alcohol. Something that did something for me that made me a little bit better. Something that made me dance a little bit better, look a little bit better, and do things that I always wanted to do and couldn't do unless I drank alcohol. Right from the beginning, I experienced problems. In high school, I drank. I started to play football. I was a pretty good athlete. In my sophomore year, I couldn't make the basketball team, and I remember a friend coming to me and saying, "Stan, your problem is that you need a little something." And he brought me a little prescription bottle full of wine, homemade wine. And I drank that prescription, and boy, did I play basketball. By the time I was a senior, I was on the varsity. And Mark said to me, your senior year, you know what we're going to do for graduation? I'm going to get a gallon of this stuff, and we're going to have a ball. And the graduation day came, and I saw Mark, and I was ready to get that gallon, and he came to me and said, "We don't have any, Stan." I says, "What's the matter?" He says, "Well, the old man was down the cellar kicking a barrel." He said he's not making anymore because the stuff it just dries out. He didn't know I was drinking it for 3 years. But he said to me, "Don't worry about a thing. I'll take you to Staten Island. I'll introduce you to a place where all you have to do is be 18. And I found a home. And every opportunity I had, I went. And, you know, I had a good time when I drank. And when I came in, I had trouble. I had trouble identifying. I had trouble telling people that I was an alcoholic. Because when I first came in, I had a great time with alcohol. I whined and I danced and I sang. I sang at the bars. I told jokes. I was never good, but I was loud. And that's what they wanted in the bars. As long as everybody could hear you, you were all right. And they gave me drinks. And I continued. I had a great time. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and they told me, maybe, just maybe, you may be an alcoholic and you can't drink anymore for one day at a time. I didn't know what to say to them. I remember my mother saying to me when I was a young man, that you have something different about you, Stasha. You're a good boy, but there's something about you. You got to be very careful. You got to start going out with the older fellas. Little did she realize I was the instigator of all these deals. I remember as a young man, everybody got a job in a food fair. Or the Acme. I got a job in a liquor distributing place. I used to make up liquor orders and then take the garbage out. I always took the garbage out. And why does Stanley always want to take the garbage out? Because Stanley knew that there was an incinerator. And I would put a little bottle in the boxes. And I put it out in the incinerator. And I'd wait till it got dark and I had my stuff. And already at that time at 13, I remember sitting in an abandoned building and drinking with another man. A man who later on at 32 came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Stayed sober for 2 months. Got drunk again, fell and punctured his ribs. That same man, when we drank the rock and rye, I would say to him, "Don't suck on those lemons. Don't suck on them oranges. You're going to become an alcoholic." Little did I realize what I was saying. In high school, I was an athlete. I had no problems. I came out, I was ready to join the Marine Corps. I joined the service, and I didn't win any wars, didn't win any medals. I went to Korea. I got in a little trouble. I stole a train in Japan. And I should have known then that you can't trust these Irishmen. The Irishman said to me, "Stanley, you start it and I'll stop it." Man, I started that train. He didn't know how to stop it. Good thing I could run fast, and I got away with it. I was in Kobe, Japan. I woke up, I came in with my trousers off, and I had wrapped around this little Japanese, and he was coming with this wagon. And it was 5:30 in the morning, and I wanted to see the chaplain. And what I needed a chaplain at 5:30 in the morning, and every time the SPs would come close to me, I would squeeze these trousers, and the little Japanese fellow would yell. So they got the chaplain. The chaplain came down at 5:30 in the morning, says, "Can I help you?" I said, "All I wanted to know is that you were on board in case something would happen." Well, you know, some things don't go unchanged. You know, some things don't go forgotten. I had 9 years of sobriety, and I was speaking at an anniversary in Jersey City. And I told that story, and guess what? The priest was sitting in the back of the room. And he came to me afterwards, and he had a few choice words. So I learned then that I got to tell the truth no matter what I say. But I came out of the service, I came home. I came home, and there I was, 23 years old. I was married. I went back to my old job, and at 24, I was married with 2 beautiful daughters. I had a job with 7 years of seniority. I was the shop steward in the department, and the company I worked for, Johnson & Johnson, saw fit to send me to school. They sent me to Rutgers to better myself. I bought a brand new home. I furnished it completely. And I put a new Chrysler in the driveway at age 24. And I was sitting on top of the world, and I see so many of you young people here. Listen to what I say. Because some of you think that because I'm older, and you think that because I've been around a while, I forgot what it was all about. Remember, I was young once. You were never old. I've been there before. If an old-timer comes to you and tries to tell you, listen, he's been there. He knows what it's all about, because if I would have listened, maybe it would have helped. And you know, my mother said to me, Stasher, there's something wrong with you. Things are happening. Things are happening that shouldn't be happening. Why don't you go see the priest? You were always friendly with Father Mac. And Father Mac, you know, that's not McDonald, that's Maciejewski in my hometown. This guy, I used to share all the cruets with him. I loved him. He only took 2 drops. You know, and I cleaned, he said, clean up, Stasher, and I'd clean right up. Never had no problem. And anyway, I went, and in my hometown, some of you people that know Polish people, as long as you worked, you were all right. You could do anything if you were Polish and you were, as long as you had a job. So I went to see Father Mac because my mother told me to go and see him. And Father Mac says to me, Stasher, how are you? I said, fine. He said, you working? I said, sure. He said, so what's the trouble? Like there's nothing could be wrong. I said, I think I drink too much. He said, so quit. Make more sense than that? So quit. You got trouble with drinking, so quit. And you know, when I think back now, and if you think back in your case histories, whoever told you to quit? Did anybody come to you and say, hey, Charlie, you should quit drinking completely? Not me. They all had a formula for me to stop drinking. Remember when they used to say, you know what your problem is? You should bring it home. It's those taverns that get you in trouble. Bring it home and drink it home, and your wife will watch over you and put you to bed, and you won't get any trouble. And you were good till 10 o'clock. Then at 10, you run out of something, either cigarettes or beer, and then you're off and you're gone for 2 days anyway. At least I was. And that's the way it was. Then they just say, why don't you take your wife with you? She'll watch you. She'll keep you away from those friends. The poor woman goes and she tries to keep up with you. By 10 o'clock, she's ossified. She's not used to this stuff. So now you got to stop your drinking. You got to go all the way home. You got to put her to bed. Sometimes you got to clean up after her. It wasn't worth it, so you left her home to start with. That didn't work. A friend of mine she sold him the drinks. She bought a bottle and she sold him 50 cents a shot. And at that time, we were getting 35 cents in the gin mills. So at 50 cents a shot, what is it? How many shots? 16 shots in a bottle. She was 32 shots in a bottle. She was doing pretty good. She'd get rid of one bottle, she'd go out and buy another one. 2 years she had enough money, she left the bum. She didn't need them. Are you kidding? But nobody ever told me to quit. Everybody told me to cut down. Everybody had a formula for me to stop drinking. And because I didn't stop, and because I didn't listen, when that priest said to me, Stasher, so stop, I started to get into trouble. And when I came in and I started to identify with speakers, there was absolutely nothing that you could tell me that I did not do. I was afraid to talk to the old-timers and tell them what they'd done, what I had done. I was afraid that they wouldn't believe what I had done. They would look at me and say, I spilt more than you drank. But when I started to tell them and I started to realize, they would listen. I had automobiles. I had 11 cars. And every one of those cars landed up in the same junkyard. When I hit, they were finished. There was no fixing up and doing it again. And they all went in the same junkyard. And it was funny because after the third car, I'd pick up the phone and say, Harry, this is Stan. Where is it? Never ask me what happened, or you hurt, or you sick. Where is it? I hit everything, ladies and gentlemen. I hit trucks, I hit cars, I hit buses, I hit curbs, I hit trees, I hit a guy in a ferry boat. Then had the nerve to go out there and say to him, where are you going? He's standing still, he wasn't going nowhere. I drove through a wall in a dry cleaning shop in Staten Island. And as I was sitting there on the counter drinking my beer behind the wheel, the man said to me, would you mind moving out, sir, so I can open for business? And sarcastically I said, you already open, fella. You got an 8-foot wall over there. And I didn't get locked up. I hit a pig in North Carolina, a 400-pound sow. And the pig flew in the air, I flew in the air, little piglets flew in the air. I don't know whether she had them when she was coming across the street or she had them when I hit her, but they were all over the joint. State trooper came to me and said to me, you know, he said, there's a fencing law in North Carolina and there ain't nobody going to come for that pig because they're going to pay for your car, so if you want it, you can have it. There I was with a pig that wasn't mine. I was driving the car that wasn't mine. And I was with a woman that wasn't mine. I was even more damn trouble. In my hometown in Sayreville, I hit a train. Man, I hit that train, walloped it. Good thing I'm alive today because the ladder on the train had grabbed me. And it dragged me maybe 80 feet. And I had to go to court with this, and I went by myself. And I'll never forget the judge, a Polish judge who knew me when I was that big, said to me, Stasiu, get yourself a lawyer. What do I need a lawyer for? So I would tell him and he would tell you. I'll save the money, get drunk, and I'll tell you. And not realizing the man was trying to help me, he would say things like, 3 times he postponed it. The railroad brought 4 lawyers because they knew there was something wrong there. They had no business running a train at 1 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't supposed to be there. And the judge would say to me, Stasiu, maybe it was foggy. Oh, no, the moon was out. Beautiful night. Could see all over. Maybe you didn't have any brakes, he'd say. Oh, I had brakes, I just passed inspection. You know, not realizing the man was trouble. Finally, he got so discouraged with me, he threw his hands up. He said, maybe you didn't see the train. And one of the railroad lawyers jumped up and says, Your Honor, he hit the 44th car. What do you mean he didn't see the train? 44 cars went by. Somebody suggested to my father that something happened to me in Korea because normal people don't drink like that. And I didn't drink like that before I went to Korea. Take him to a doctor. Take him someplace. The VA will help you. So they took me to a psychiatrist. They took me to a Dr. Bohm who needed a psychiatrist. And he suggested to me that I should get shock treatment. And I don't know if any of you know what shock treatment is, but in the local hospitals, they give it to you cold turkey. They just put the thing to you and they bzit you and you shake all over, and it's supposed to make it stop something. I don't know what. But he told me I got to have 21 of these things. I don't know why 21, but he said 21, so my father paid, and I would come at the door, and a girl would meet me at the door, and a nice young lady, and I didn't mind the needle they gave me because I dreamt about blondes. I always dreamt about blondes when I had this stuff in me, some kind of medicine, I don't know. And then they bzit you. Now, this guy bzit me like this 16 times. And the only thing that happened was I got thirsty. God, I would run out of that doctor's office to a soda shop, a milk shop, anything. I got so thirsty. And I would not let him give me another shot because he said to me, he's going to make me forget everything that ever made me drink, and then some. And then some was that bothered me. Because I had stuff hidden in the cellar, behind the boards, up in the ceiling, under the roses. If he would ever made me forget, I'd have never been the same. And I never went back to him. I knocked on the doors of a nut house. And today it's an ARU unit. In those days we had no ARU units. This was a nut house. If you got into trouble drinking, they put you in this nut house. Some reason or other, they talked me into it. My bills were up to here. The sheriff was taking my house. He had already taken a car. And there I was, and I knocked on the doors of Marlborough State Hospital. And they wouldn't let me in. The lady came out and said, you don't belong here. And you know, we alcoholics at that time did not belong anywhere. If you took it to an emergency room, they'd say, get him out of here. We got room for people who are sick. He's drunk. And we had no place to put him years ago. And I got in this place because I argued with the doctor. I heard the doctor say something in Polish, and I picked it up. And I learned she was from the white side of Poland. And she spoke half English and half Russian and half Polish. And I started on her in Polish, and she got aggravated with me. And she said, sign the bum in and leave him here. Well, I signed in and I went in. And we had no separate, they had 2 floors in Marlborough then. They had nuts and nutsier. It's the truth, that's what they call them, no offense. And they sent me right up the nutsier. They didn't even know what was wrong with me yet. And I was drunker than a skunk. And I couldn't see for 2 days, but the 3rd day, I started to get sober. And they didn't. You know, they were there, and they were there for a reason, and I had no business there. And I went back to this doctor. I'm sorry I insulted you. You're right, I don't belong here. You should let me out. She says, oh no. She says, I waited for you to come begging. She said, what you need is a little occupational therapy. And being Polish, Mike, I thought it was something to eat. I didn't know it was work. So she gave me a job. And they put me in a butcher shop. And I walked into the butcher shop and I heard funny noises. And I didn't know what was going on, but I looked around, and the first guy that looked sensible enough to me, I said, hey, who are inmates and who aren't? He said, they're all inmates. I said, they all got cleavers. You got to be kidding. I didn't stay there too long. Then came the day where you have to go in front of the board. I don't know if any of you remember going in front of the board in the nut house. 7 men with degrees sat at a table. And here you come. Paper slippers, paper shoes, paper pants, paper jacket, 1-button roll. And you stand there shivering because it's cold. And they say to you, have you learned anything? That was my first question. Did you learn anything? I said, yeah, I learned not to come back here. That's what I learned. And they let me out. They let me out on my own, and the second time, they told me the first time, you will be back. Not here. Maybe some other hospital, but not here. Yes, I was. But this time I came back with no arms to knock on that door. This time I came back in one of those jackets with no sleeves. And they threw me in a cell that was padded. And I remember like today, running up the walls and knowing right well that I cannot run up walls. I remember tearing off my clothes and bleeding and wiping my face with the clothes. And I remember the men coming in with needles and sticking me because they had to tame me down. And for a period of 12 to 14 days, I was in that room. And after 14 days, they let me out for a week, and there I was again, paper slippers, paper pants, 1-button roll. Did you learn anything? And they let me out again. No help. No mention of Alcoholics Anonymous. No mention, have you got a problem with alcohol? They let me out again. By this time, I had lost my home. I had lost my wife. I had lost my children. I had lost the cars that I had. I lost everything. I ran out of alcohol one day and decided to make my own concoction and got rubbing alcohol and club soda, and I walk around with 2 pretty slanted wrists. I cut my wrists so bad I couldn't sew them. And every time I put on a shirt, I look, I see, and I thank God that my oldest daughter came and found me. And at 6, I think she was 6 years old, went to a neighbor and said, please, my daddy is bleeding. And they saved my life, and I knew then, I know now that God was saving me for something. And I was back at it again. I walked into my favorite gin mill. I had no more friends any longer. And my gin mill friends, the bartender, the barmaid, the one that I was in there all the time with, the one I supported, she said, Stan, we've never flagged you. You've never caused any trouble here. But I'm going to tell you, have your beer and please leave. Because we don't want your kind around here. And I didn't really know what kind I was. I realized today that those people did not drink like I did anymore. I could not drink with those people any longer. I couldn't go home and change shirts and take a shower and go out and have 2 drinks. If I went through all the trouble of taking a shower and putting on a clean shirt, I'm gone for a week at least. I was a little bit different in my drinking now. So I went and I looked for the people that drank that I did, like I did. I looked for people that had no sense of responsibility once they had a few drinks. And I landed up on Mulberry Street in Newark. And they kicked me off Mulberry Street. Now that's going some. Delaware Street in Baltimore, Vine Street in Philadelphia, just as bad. They kicked me off Mulberry Street. I left Mulberry Street and I went into New York. I went into New York and I landed on the Bowery. And I think at that time I was the youngest man on the Bowery at that time. I was there when the 9 men drank the turpentine and mixed it with a solution. And I would not touch that turpentine because I was in the paint business. And I knew what turpentine did to my hands. 9 of those fellas, 8 of them went blind, and 1 was fortunate enough to survive. And I drank and I did things on a Bowery I dare not tell you. I dare not think about. I always worked. I was a hard-working man. I loved to drink, but I loved to eat. And I stood on corners and I unloaded trucks. And I went to Orchard Street and I unloaded the stores. I put the clothes out in the streets. And I would get $3 and a bottle of wine. And I would go this way, continue. I made my way. I met a friend, a man who I'm deeply, deeply grateful to. A man who was not an alcoholic. A man who was a dentist from Detroit. And he was only on the bar because he was sick and tired of routine. His wife asked him one time, does your suit match your socks and your tie? He said, what do you care? And he left. And he was on a bar for 8 years. He lived in a hotel. He got a check every Friday. And every time I wanted money, I got it. It wasn't long that I became a pretty popular figure on the bar. People knew me. And I was getting along pretty good. In fact, 9 years, I think it was 9.5 years of sobriety. We went to an NIT, 3 AA members and my daughter. And I took her into Sammy's Follies, where I had once worked for. And I walked in and the bartender was there. And the bartender looked at me, didn't even say my name. He said, hey, Polak, you look great. You must have stopped drinking. 9.5 years, because you can imagine what I looked like when I was there. But it was this dentist who one August day I came to and I said, Phil, I need $10 bad. He said, I probably know what you need it for. And you know, years ago, a few months ago, when you asked me, I was willing to give it back to you, or give it to you, because I always knew you were able to work and you were able to pay me back. I depend on every nickel I get home, from home. I cannot give you $10 and not get it back. And I really don't know whether you can. So I went downtown and I sold a pint of blood on 21st Street. And I came back and I waved the $5 at him. I didn't need you. But 2 weeks later, I needed him again. And this time I came for $5. And he turned me down again. And this time I went to 8th Avenue, sold a pint of blood, and I came back. And this man said to me, look, I don't know what your problem is. You don't seem stupid. You're pretty popular. You can do almost anything you want to do if you put your mind to it. He said, why don't you decide to go home? Find your wife, find your family, start life all over again. Whatever that problem is, they will probably find it there better than they will here. For if you don't find the answer there, they're going to carry you out of here feet first. And he gave me his last $18 and he said, take this money and go home. And for $18, folks, I'd have stood on my head. And I left and I headed for New Brunswick with a trucker, and I got to the New Brunswick Circle. And when I came to the New Brunswick Circle, I said to the trucker, you know, I don't think I'm going to get out here. He says, yes, you're going. I said, no. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Philly. And I said, gee, I ain't been in Philly in a long time. And I landed up on Vine Street, and some of you are probably familiar. Not the new Vine Street that's got the nice highway running through it, the old Vine Street. And when the $18 ran out, you guessed it, 12th and Race, Sharp and Doan. If you were standing, you had blood. And I sold another pint of blood, and I walked out, and it was too much. For I fell in the middle of the street. And I remember like today, I heard cars honking. I heard people screaming. And a man, whoever he was, I think it was a policeman, came and dragged me. And I still feel my heels clicking on the curb. And he brought me and left me in an alley. I don't know what was going to happen, and I don't remember what happened. I don't know whether it was 2 days or 4 days or 2 weeks. But I remember when I came to, I couldn't see. And when I came to, I couldn't hear. And I think the biggest surprise came when I started to yell, and absolutely nothing came out, and I couldn't move. And it was then that I remember my mother telling me, if you're ever in a situation, pray to St. Joseph for a happy death. They taught me that in Polish school. And that's what I did. I prayed. I prayed for that happy death. I made my amends with God. And I said to him, you know, if this is my penalty, I felt I was being penalized for something that I had done. If this is my penalty, I accept it. But if you could give me just one more shot, I'll see what I can do. And lo and behold, I started to smell. I couldn't see and I couldn't hear, but I started to smell. The old schnoz was working. Boy, I'll tell you, and these guys came by, there were two of them, and did they stink. Wow, were they ripe. And I said, thank God, because if they stink as bad as I do, guess what? They have to be my friends. Because I'll tell you, I've been on both sides of the street. I've been in AA, and I experienced love and affection and passion like never anywhere. And if you get down there on that Bowery or Vine Street, you're going to experience the same love, understanding, and compassion that you do here. For there is no greater love than one alcoholic has for another. And these two men came and they carried me. And they took me. And they fed me muscatel and white bread for a period of 10 or 12 days. And I got up and I walked. I walked directly to a hot shop and I hocked my watch. Because I was going to reward them for doing me a favor. And I took them to a gin mill and offered them something to eat. They didn't want to eat. They wanted to drink. And we had a few beers, and I laid the money on a bar. And like it was yesterday, I remember. One man was 55. The other man was 56. And I did not want to be where they were at 55 and 56. The last sane moment of my insane life. Sane enough to make a decision to leave. And I walked out in the street and I fell. I tripped into the street and my hand went up in the air like that, and a fella came by on Vine Street and thought I was hitchhiking. In the little Volkswagen, he said, kid, where are you going? I says, I think I'm going to Jersey. You talk about miracles. And they started to happen. I don't know what miracles are, but I call them unexplained and unexpected events. Because that's what started to happen. I came home and I walked down the street and people ran away from me. They talked about me more than they talked to me. My own mother, when I walked in the door, promptly got the broom and threw me out. And she's 5 foot tall. But she's got a big broom. She told me to go find my wife and my family, which I hadn't seen for a while. I had no idea where they were. I had a little baby, a third daughter, that I hadn't even seen too much. So I went. She said on her way out, you know, you should join the Society for Drinkers I read about in the Franciscan missionary's book. And I said, me? Society for Drinkers? For what? I'm 28 years old. I only drink beer and whatever else I can get. Not me, Mom. I'm not one of those guys. Because in those days, call me anything. You can call a person a drunk, a bum, but God forbid you should call him an alcoholic. And I left to look for my wife and children. And it took me 4 days to go 6 miles. And I found them in an old dilapidated building. My daughter was telling me when they walked on a second floor, the paint peelings were falling into their cereal in the mornings. And I was in the paint business. My family, I put them there. And they were happy there. They were happy there because I was not there to cause confusion. And I was asked to leave, and I was leaving. And as I left, my oldest daughter came to me and pulled down my trousers. And she said, Daddy, did you forget that today's my birthday? That was September the 30th, my daughter's birthday. That daughter today is over 35. And I have not forgotten a birthday since. Because I went back to my mother and asked her about the Society for Drinkers. And I called the old Bigelow 121215 number. And a man answered the telephone. We had no answering service. We had volunteers, and a man picked up the phone and said, hiya, kid, how you doing? Who you calling for, your brother? I said, no, for me. He said, well, I don't have much time. And I said to my mother, who was standing next to me with the broom, Mom, you see, they're busy. They don't have no time. She picked up the broom and she said, you wait till they get on busy. And this little 5-foot mother stood guard over the telephone with a big broom until another man got on the telephone, Tom D. Some of you might not know Tom, but I'm sure you might have known Jerry Delaney, who owns the Alina Lodge. It was her husband who came on the phone and spoke with me and invited me to Newark for 2 days. Gave me a meeting book and told me to go home. And he said, stay home and someone will come to get you. And some of you old-timers might remember, when we used to get a call from Intergroup, we didn't wait till tomorrow. We didn't wait until we were finished with our shift. We didn't wait until we felt better. We went immediately. Because at that time, Alcoholics Anonymous was the last resort. You would call and you would do everything possible to avoid calling Alcoholics Anonymous, because that made you an alcoholic. So you ran, because you never knew exactly how you were going to find the person you were going to 12-step. We always took another person just in case. Yes, we found them over radiators, burned to death. We found them with guns in their laps. We found them with big hoses into their cars, because we came too late. Why they didn't come immediately for me, I don't know. But I waited Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and nobody came. And Saturday night I was all dressed up and I was ready to get drunk, and my mother said to me, Stasio, make one more telephone call this Saturday night at 10 after 9. And then if you must go, forget it. And I figured, hell, at 10 after 9 on a Saturday night, even the Alkies are whooping it up somewhere. There's nobody in that office. I'll call them up. And I picked up the phone, and another unexplained and unexpected event. Tom Delaney was in that office changing light bulbs. And he answered the phone. He said, Kid, how are you? He said, did you make any meetings? I said, no. He said, why not? I said, nobody came to get me. Oh, who the hell took you by your little hand and took you to the gin mill? And he continued to tell me things like, I thought you Polacks had some guts. He said, I think you're chicken to make a meeting. I said, who the hell are you calling chicken? And I hung up the phone. Guess what? I didn't go drinking that night. He had something I wanted. I wanted that smile on his face. And I also figured I know what he's doing. He told me not to drink until an AA member calls me. So I waited 5 days and an AA member called me. Now I'm going to probably wait 8 days and another AA member is going to call me. That's probably how they stay sober. But I'll fix that bum. The next time I see him, I'll stay sober. And I didn't go out and get drunk, in spite of him. And the next morning, my mother woke me up and took me to church. And we walked down this little path, this little mother, and she said, you better go to church and pray. She said, do you want me to run over the Our Father and Hail Mary with you? I said, why? She said, you probably forgot it. I said, no, I didn't forget. And I recited to her. I learned the Our Father in English in the AA. I even confess in Polish. That's a pretty good gimmick to have, you know. It's all right. I was in a service. I'd go to the chaplains and tell them, I can't do it in English. Do any language you want, son. And man, they blessed me and sent me out. Never knew what the hell I said. I was in South Carolina one time and decided to go with priests after a heavy weekend. So I walked in this little bitty parish. Must have had about 6 stools across, and there was a priest sitting up at the railing. You know how they sit so they can't see you? And he calls me up, and I go up, and I say to him, I said, Father, I can't do it in English. He says, God understands all languages, young man. Whatever language you choose is okay with me. And I rattled it off in Polish. I went back to year 1, and he raised his hand, Niech Pan Bóg błogosławi in Polish, and I almost died. I got scared and I ran away, and he called me back. He said, young man, you stay here. I'm giving you a penance. You got one coming and you're going to get it in English. So this good mother took me to church, and that evening, ladies and gentlemen, I hopped on a bus and I went to St. Mary's in South Amboy. I came there 2 hours late and I stood in front of the meeting. I stood in front of the building and I was waiting. And men would come by and say, are you waiting for A? Oh no, I'm waiting for my sister. And I gave all kinds of excuses. Finally, one man came and said, you know, Charlie, the trolley car don't stop here anymore. You might as well come on in. And at 10 minutes to 8, that Sunday night, I walked in. And I walked in the wrong door. Everybody came in that one. I came in that one. And a man went all the way across the room and stuck out a mitt. And he said, welcome. And I have never had a handshake like that in my life. I felt all the love and the compassion that I experience here today. And you know, every group, and I only belong to 2 groups. All the time I've been in AA, no matter what group I'm associated with, there's a man, there's a woman standing at that door. You come to Sayreville, and we take turns. Welcome to Sayreville. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Are you new? Talk to that man. Talk to that lady. We got them designated ahead of time. We don't have to go looking for people to talk to. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous was to me when I came in. I came in and I sat down. I sat down between two men, 56 and 63, 28. What in God's name am I doing here? My mother did it to me again. I went to say something, the guy poked me in the ribs and said, "Shut up and listen." This guy is 63 years old. He's thinner than old Earl over here. I could blow at him and he could fall over, and he's poking me in the ribs. The other guy raps me on the other side. He says, "You must be new." Oh. These guys are intelligent. "And since you're new," he said to me, "you probably don't have a sponsor." I said, "What's that?" He said, "You got one." The other guy said, "I'm going to help him because this guy, you're going to need it." And that's how I got my sponsor. And that's how we used to get sponsors. They used to come to us and say, "Hey, buddy, are you new?" "Yep, you got one," until somebody better comes along. And you know, we never fired our sponsors like they do today. We never even laid them off like they do today. Now they even outgrow them. How about that one? "Oh, I outgrew my sponsor." "How long you sober?" 7 months. "How about your sponsor?" 11 years. "But I make more meetings than he does." The meeting started and the man got up and he talked. And the first man that got up to speak, I identified immediately. Because he was a carnival barker, and I used to run away with the carnival twice a year. I loved the carnivals when I was a kid. Then another man came up. He was a Southerner. And he was talking about this and about that. And I didn't know what he was talking about. But I kept listening because he thought he was in an Irish town and he told a Polish story. And he said he was a young fellow who was Polish and he got a brand new car and he took his friends for a ride. And he took his friends for a ride and they hit a slick spot on the road and the car turned over. And a state trooper came and he said, "Hey, fella." He said, "This your car?" He said, "No, my car." He says, "If you got a car." He said, "I got on a car." He said, "But mine got the wheels on the top. This one got the wheels on the bottom." Vice versa. And I laughed. I laughed so hard I couldn't believe it. And I wanted to stay. After the meeting, a man came to me and said, "Be on the corner. We're going to pick you up tomorrow." "What do you mean, be on the corner? We're going to pick you up?" This is my sponsor talking. He didn't ask me if I wanted to go. He told me to be on a corner. I said, "What corner?" He said, "Tanner's Corner." I said, "Tanner's Corner? That's 7.5 miles from home." He said, "You know where the Crestwood is around the corner?" He said, "Yeah, I've been drinking there." He said, "Then be there. You know where it's at." And I went there and I stood on a corner. And I waited. I didn't know who was going to pick me up. I didn't know where we were going. My mother used to say, "What kind of outfit you get into?" You don't know what time you're supposed to be there. You don't know where you're going. You don't know who's going to pick you up. You don't know where they're going to take you. Half the time you come home, you don't know where the hell you've been. And it was the truth. All I did was go there, and they picked me up. I was in 3 states one time, and it was only Wednesday. We used to call this frantic sobriety. It was frantic, all right. You had time to do nothing else. My sponsor put me on a 12-hour, 6-hour program because he said 24 hours is too much for a little Polish boy. 6 hours at 6 in the morning. I got up for work. I had to call him. At 12 o'clock, I called him again. If you don't have a dime or you don't have a nickel, reverse the charges. And every dinner he used to say to me, "What are you eating today?" If some of you know Polish mothers, every time you open up your lunch bag, it's a surprise. Pork chop sandwiches with the bones in them. Mashed potato sandwiches. Couple of banana sandwiches with the brown edges, you know, because you want to get rid of them. So he'd ask me, "What kind of sandwiches you got today?" When I told him I got a spaghetti sandwich one time, he never asked me again. That was his way of making me comfortable for the end of the day. At 6 o'clock, he would call me and tell me, "Be on the corner." And guess what? I started to speak. I got the velvet hand. The iron hand and the velvet glove in the back of an automobile going back and forth to meetings. He told me in Alcoholics Anonymous, we never go alone to a meeting. And if you have to go alone, call 3 people first. If you can't get anybody, call me and I'll take you. Until this day, I don't like to go to an AA meeting alone. Then I went to all kinds of meetings. And I started to get used. And I didn't know what this was all about. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I never had a rehab. Never read the big book. They were my rehab. They were my big book. They were my 12 steps and 12 traditions. Anything they said, I believed because they were happy, they were smiling, and I wanted to smile and I wanted to feel good. And at 7 weeks of sobriety, my sponsor said to me, gee, you can talk pretty good. If you can talk up there like you can talk in back of the car, we got a speaker. And those days, we used to steal speakers from groups because we didn't have any speakers. If you could put 3 sentences together, you got it, man. You belong in our group, I'm talking to those times, when you came into AA and you had a car, they wondered where you stole it. If you weren't in jail, they asked you what you were doing here. It's not like today your wife kicks you out, you come to AA and you stay sober. Thank God, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So he said to me, would you like to speak in front of a group? Would I love to speak in front of a group? Is the Pope Catholic? Are you kidding? I said, of course. I said, all you have to do, Phil, is find me a group, okay, that'll suit me and I'll be glad to. Talk about ego. What kind of group would you like, Stanley? Well, I said, well, what give you one with a lot of painters and carpenters and masons, that kind of work I'm in. Montclair. And I don't know if there's an Upper Montclair around here. He must know it. There isn't a painter in Upper Montclair. Everybody, this is a place, if you lose your license, your chauffeur drives you around for 2 years. Everybody's got a degree from Princeton. Nobody works, everybody owns something. And I walked into this meeting and there's a lady with a gown on. This meeting place don't have chairs, it's got sofas. And she takes the silver kettle and she's pouring coffee into a cup. Not one of these paper jobs, I'm talking China, with a saucer underneath. And you talk about class, it matched, same set. And you want me to speak here? You're crazy. And out I went, out the door, right in the heart of Montclair, and he was crippled. And old Phil came and he grabbed me with his cane, and he said, now wait a minute, Stanley. He said, Tuesday you said within reason. Within reason you would do anything for AA. What are you doing now? So like the little puppy dog with you-know-what, I went upstairs. And I said, my name is Stan, I'm an alcoholic, and I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it, folks, because I didn't know what an alcoholic was. All I knew is that I was feeling better. All I knew that I felt good. And it was so good to feel good, I'd have said anything. And I spoke for 40 minutes, and you people ain't shut me up since. And today we have speaker meetings in our area. We have a lot of speaker meetings. Our group is a speaker meeting. We fight to speak. We go to other groups and speak, and I encourage people to speak because confession is so good for the soul. Young people come to me and they say, I get nervous, I shake up that. I said, that's not nerves, man. That's God shaking the truth out of you. Just keep shaking. They say to me, I'm in the middle, I'm at the end. I get all mixed up. Well, who knows where you're at? You don't know where I'm at. I may be at the beginning yet, And then you ladies, there's so many ladies that are afraid to speak. Oh, why don't you speak, honey? Oh, I got such a boring story. Do you know how many women sitting out there waiting for a boring story? And it's only boring because you make it boring. You seem like you all drank the same way. Got up in the morning, put on my house coat with the cigarette burns in it, pulled down my Venetian blinds, and I drank. Had to be a little more action than that. I drank with some of you ladies. Now, don't give me that. Don't give me that stuff, that's all it was. Come out and share with us. Tell us about it. We need you so bad. And I came and I listened. And as I listened, I learned. And easy, time and time, I got into a group, I got involved. I made the coffee and I went on 12-step calls. Those days we used to be on a farm team. Some of you old-timers might remember, not that I'm that old. I was just fortunate enough to come into the program early. And if there's anything I got out of Alcoholics Anonymous is I got old. But that's okay. That's great. We used to be on a farm team. My sponsor used to take me and sit me down over here. I was the guy that made the coffee. And if they spilt the coffee, I would wipe it up. I listened to what he said when he 12-stepped. And then my day had come. And he got sick conveniently, and I had to get somebody and go on my 12-step. Because that's the way it was done. And I learned this. I used to ask about the steps, and he used to say, don't worry about them. You've got to get better physically. And he was right, because I was run down. He said, don't worry about the step. The first step is that you can't. The second one is that he can. And the third one, why not let him? That's all you have to worry about. And it took me 19 months of going around to Alcoholics Anonymous under his care. And he said to me, Stan, get ready, because we're going to start work. What do you mean, work? What do you think we've been doing for 19 months? My mother hasn't seen me. He says, now we work the steps. And I went to a step meeting that had 12 men. We did 12 steps in 12 weeks. Try it sometime. It's fantastic. After the third meeting, you're gaining confidence in the people you're with. You're with the same people for 12 weeks. You say what you want, and you do what you want. And what those people taught me at 19 months, when I do the steps today, when I lead the meetings, I still say the same things. I still say that the first step I took backwards, because you had to show me that my life was unmanageable before I admitted that I was an alcoholic. They told me that this is the only step that I have to take 100%. This is the only one. And this is the one people get in trouble with, because they admit, but they don't have enough sense to do something about it. And he said, they think there's no must in this program? Forget it. The first must is that you must stop drinking in order to get sobriety. And the second one, yes, I was insane. And the third one, they made very simple. I see people going around scratching their heads and almost getting drunk over the third step. My sponsor said to me, it's easy. Your will is to drink. His will is for you to stay sober, because he sent you to Alcoholics Anonymous. Act accordingly. Fourth step, character defects. I did character defects that I didn't even have. Because the book said you got to be impatient. I never was impatient. I could wait in a ticket line. I could wait in a baseball line. I can wait in a chow line. It made no difference. I stand there and wait. He said, what are you working on that for? Work on the ones you got. Like ego. I say, Phil, I got no ego. That's enthusiasm. And then I went into my fifth step. There's another step that don't say you have to do it all. You don't have to do it at one sitting. It took me 17 years and 8 months to do my fifth step completely. Because I did as much as my sobriety allowed me to. And I couldn't do no more with the fear that I would have got drunk. I spoke upstate not too long ago, and I noticed a man sitting in the audience. And the man was sitting there sweating. I mean, sweating bullets. The sweat was coming down, and I couldn't understand it, because I was speaking, I was cool, and everybody else was. After the meeting, the man came to me and knelt in front of me. And he said, Stan, how are you? You son of a gun, you didn't change one bit. Am I glad to see you? Didn't know who he was. We talked a minute, and he said to me, and he was shaking furiously. He said to me, Stan, do you remember now? I'm Blackie. I lost all my hair. I was the fellow that was with you on the Bowery. Do you remember when you got thrown out of this particular building? If you got thrown out of one of these rehabs that they had there, they would send you down the middle aisle, and they would throw anything at you that they had in their hands. And it was a dishonor. It was bad. Well, they did this to me. And we had a woman on the Bowery who they called Tomato Mary. This woman was an older woman who was on drugs at the time. And she took care of the alcoholic. She would go get bread from the bakeries. And she would steal tomatoes from the vendors. And she would come and make us sandwiches so we can eat, so we can survive. And if we had a nickel or a dime, we would give it to her. And everybody respected her, and nobody dared touch Mary or say a bad thing about Mary. And the day had come that somebody had beaten Mary and stole her money. And I was blamed for it. And Blackie said to me, Stan, you didn't do it, I know, because I was the one that did it. 13 years of sobriety. And he finally finished his 5th step. Fabulous. Stories in Alcoholics Anonymous, unexpected and unexplained events. And I got into the steps and I worked them all the way through. And it was tough for me. It was hard for me. But I listened. It was hard for me to listen. My sponsor said, you're the problem with the problem. Not your wife, not your boss. And you've got to work on yourself. He told me a little story, and I want to end with this. He told me a little story about the little boy, and you heard it probably the last time I was here, whose grandfather was watching him. And this little boy was a problem. He would run around the house. He would run out in the backyard. And he disturbed the grandfather. The grandfather couldn't even read the newspaper. And he would give him things to do, like he would send him out and say, oh, count the peaches on a tree or the pickets on a fence, only to have the little boy come back. And then he opened up the paper and he saw a map of the world. So he took this map and he ripped it up into 1,000 pieces. And he gave it to the little boy and he said, take it in the kitchen and put it together. That'll keep you. 5 minutes later, the little boy is back and said, Grandpa, come on and look, it's all together. And the grandfather went and looked, and there it was, piece for piece, everything in its right place. The grandfather was surprised, and he said, son, how did you do it? He said, Grandpa, it was easy. For on the other side of the map of the world was a man. I put the man together, and the whole world fell right into place. And that's just the way it was with me. After I got into the steps, they started to get into place. If you're new, if this is your first convention, come back. If you're new, don't go out there and try it again. A slip or a relapse is not part of the program. It is not part of the program. You don't have to slip to become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You can come and stay like I have and many, many others. The third tradition says there's only one requirement. But remember, it is a requirement. It is a requirement. And the days had gone by, and I'm sober today. I'm going close on 30 years, and I'm still a young man. And things have been fantastic for me. Things happen. Now I'm back. I went through the chairs of intergroup. I went through the chairs of general service. I was a delegate for the North Jersey, and I continued. Because my sponsor many years ago told me, don't you dare tell me about gratitude. Gratitude is not a word. Gratitude is an action. Show me. Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you're grateful sitting at an AA meeting. You're only there because you have to be, just like I do. But let me see you walk through the door with a new man. Let me hear you say that you got to go 10 miles to take him home. Let me hear you say when the Giants are playing football, you're going to go down to a hospital and talk to a sick alcoholic. You don't have to tell me that you're grateful. You're showing me. And I live by that. Today I come in, even my mother says to me sometimes today, Stashu, how long, you're not stupid, how long are you going to take to learn this program? How long are you going to keep coming back? And I keep coming back because I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what you've done for me. I still, every once in a while, the good Lord sends me a newcomer. And he sent me one, and this guy, you know, we're a Polish group down there in Sayreville, and in comes this little Jewish boy with a Polish name. And I've got nothing against anybody, but we're having a ball with this guy. He's got 6 months of sobriety now, and I 12-stepped him the old way. I said, call me. He says, what do you mean call you? I said, I'm not calling you. You want the program, don't you? He said, I got it for myself. You need it, you call me. And I would have called him if he didn't, but he called me every day. And I told him to call me anytime he feels like it. What a mistake. This guy. 2:30, 12:30, 5:30. Every time he's got a problem, but he's getting better. He says to me the other day, he says, gee, he says, how many meetings did you make last week? because I make a lot of meetings during the daytime. I'm on the road, and I stop in daytime meetings. I said, I made 12. He said, 12 meetings with all your sobriety? He says, what the heck do you need 12 meetings for? I said, I don't need 12, I only need 2. He said, what'd you make 12 for? I said, I don't know what 2 I need. So I keep coming. And I could probably go on for another hour because I am very grateful. And I could tell you stories in Alcoholics. And I met a lady here, a young lady, who I met in Delaware, who was just coming into the program. Today she's sitting in front of you and she's making signs for people that can't hear. AA works in strange ways. It's fantastic. I want to leave you with a thought. When you go back to your groups, everybody should have a group, my sponsor told me. You should belong to a group. And if you get into a group, you become a member, not a joiner. Because we have joiners. They join everything. They do nothing. They belong to 8 groups. They don't do anything in any. My sponsor said a member is a guy who knows, or a gal who knows where the key is to open up the door in case the coffee maker don't show up. I know where the key is. I know where the group is. If you're a newcomer, get into a group. Keep those doors open as they were open for you. Many before me had the doors open for me. Many were out there shaking hands. You know, it's like the fella in Las Vegas who left California and a drunk. He got to Las Vegas and he was broke. And he had to go to the bathroom and he's standing on his pole and he's shaking. And a well-dressed gentleman came to him and said, what's wrong, young man? He says, I got to go to the bathroom. He said, go ahead. He says, I can't. Everything's got a slot around here. So he said, dug in his pocket and he gave him the dime. And the man ran to the bathroom. He was ready to put the dime in and the door was open. And he ran in and he did his business. He went to the one arm and he started hitting. And before he left, he had $30,000. He went back to Ohio. And his sponsor was a financial analyst and put the money in and invested it. Now this guy's sober 6 or 7 years and he's worth $300,000. And he's speaking in Southern California and he's telling the story. And the guy all the way in the back of the room yells out, hey! He said, I'm the guy that gave you the dime. He said, I don't need you. I want the guy that left the door open. So keep the door open for that new man. I am tremendously honored to see you here all today, to be able to speak before you again. I'm honored that we were able to laugh together, because I always say I came into the program to live. I didn't come in here to die. And I laugh at everything I can. I want to enjoy life. In closing, have one thought in mind on the way home. That if you keep God in this hand and you keep God an AA in this one, you don't have a hand left to pick up that first drink. Thank you. God bless you. Have a nice day.
Now I want to thank Stan, and before we close, we have a little token that I'd like to give to him from the group here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Whenever you want. It's whatever. You can wait.
The last time they gave me kielbasa.
I know what that is.
Maybe it's the rye bread now, huh?
Yeah, right.
Oh boy, it's beautiful. Thank you. Set of mugs. Terrific. That's your emblem on it. Thank you very much.
We will have the music shortly, and now we have a nice way of closing. Thank you. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.